two men disguised as police officers walked into a museum. 81 minutes later, 13 priceless masterpieces had vanished more than 3 decades later. Not a single one has been recovered. This is the true story of the greatest art theft in history, and the mystery nobody has been able to solve. Before we can understand the greatest art theft in history, we need to understand the woman who made it possible. Because this wasn't just another museum, it was someone's dream. A dream built over decades, filled with treasures gathered from across Europe, and protected by one final wish that would outlive her. Her name was Isabella Stewart Gardner. Born in New York City in 1840, Isabella Stewart married Boston businessman John Lowell Gardner Jr. Together, they traveled extensively across Europe, Egypt, the Middle East, and Asia. During these journeys, Isabella developed a deep passion for art, architecture, and cultural history. Rather than collecting paintings simply as symbols of wealth, she envisioned something much more ambitious, a museum where visitors could experience art in carefully designed surroundings, just as she imagined it should be seen. After inheriting a substantial fortune following her father's death, Isabella devoted herself to building that vision. Construction of the museum began in 1899 in Boston's Fenway neighborhood. Inspired by the elegance of a 15th-century Venetian palace, the building itself became part of the collection. When the museum opened to the public in 1903, it housed one of America's most remarkable private art collections. Inside were masterpieces by Rembrandt, Vermeer, Titian, Raphael, Botticelli, Manet, Degas, and countless other artists whose works shaped the history of Western art. But what truly made this museum unique wasn't just the collection. It was Isabella's final instruction. In her will, she required that the arrangement of the galleries remain essentially unchanged after her death. The placement of the paintings, furniture, sculptures, even the atmosphere, was meant to stay exactly as she had created it. She believed the museum itself was a work of art. That decision would have an unexpected consequence. When 13 priceless works were stolen in 1990, the museum chose not to replace them. Instead, the empty frames were left hanging, not as decoration, but as a promise. A promise that the missing masterpieces still belong there, waiting for the day they finally return. For nearly 90 years, Isabella's vision remained untouched. Then, in the early hours of March 18, 1990, two men dressed as police officers walked toward a side entrance. Within the next 81 minutes, history would change forever. With March 17, 1990, Boston was celebrating St. Patrick's Day. Across the city, bars were crowded, streets were busy, and thousands of people were still awake long after midnight. Just a few miles away, inside the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, the galleries were dark. The visitors were gone. Only 2 security guards remained. Neither of them could have imagined they were about to become part of one of the greatest unsolved crimes in history. It was the early morning of March 18, 1990. The museum was closed to the public. 2 security guards were on duty. 23-year-old Rick Abath, stationed at the security desk near the employee entrance, and Randy Heston, making his scheduled patrols through the galleries. The museum's security system included motion detectors and alarms, but its procedures relied heavily on the guards following strict protocols, especially one rule: never open the side entrance to anyone after hours unless specifically authorized. At approximately 1:24 a.m., 2 men wearing what appeared to be Boston police uniforms approached the museum's employee entrance. Through the intercom, they claimed they were responding to a report of a disturbance. Rick Abath looked at the security monitor. Instead of following museum policy, he decided to unlock the door. It was a decision investigators would examine for decades. For a few moments, everything appeared routine. Then one of the officers said something unexpected. "You look familiar." He claimed there was a warrant for the guard's arrest. Rick Abath stepped away from the security desk. It was exactly what the intruders wanted. Once Rick Abath stepped away from the control desk, the disguise was dropped. "This is a robbery," one of the men reportedly announced. When Randy Heston returned from his patrol, he too was restrained. The guards were handcuffed, their wrists and ankles taped, and they were secured in the museum's basement. The thieves had gained complete control of the building. Now alone inside the museum, the thieves didn't rush. For the next 81 minutes, they moved deliberately through the galleries. They ignored countless valuable objects. Instead, they selected just 13 works of art. Some were carefully removed from their frames. Others were cut directly from the canvas. When they finally left the museum, they had taken masterpieces that would become the most valuable unrecovered stolen artworks in the world. Here's the question that still puzzles investigators. If these men were professional art thieves, why did they leave behind paintings worth even more than the ones they stole? The answer may reveal what they were really after. When investigators entered the museum that morning, they weren't just looking at a crime scene. They were looking at 13 empty spaces, each representing a piece of history that had survived wars, revolutions, and centuries of change, only to disappear in a single night. But here's what puzzled investigators almost immediately. The thieves didn't take the most expensive paintings. They took very specific ones. The most significant loss was Rembrandt's The Storm on the Sea of Galilee. Painted in 1633, it is widely recognized as Rembrandt's only known seascape. Its dramatic depiction of Christ calming a violent storm made it one of the museum's greatest treasures. The thieves didn't carefully remove it. They cut the canvas directly from its frame. The empty frame still hangs in the museum today. Another masterpiece was Johannes Vermeer's The Concert. Only about 3 dozen paintings are generally attributed to Vermeer today, making every surviving work extraordinarily rare. The Concert is considered one of the most valuable missing paintings in the world. Its disappearance alone transformed the robbery into an international investigation. Then, investigators noticed something even stranger. Several masterpieces, equally valuable or even more valuable, were left behind. Just a few feet away from the stolen Rembrandt hung a lady and gentleman in black. It wasn't touched. Other world-class works throughout the museum also remained exactly where they had been. If money had been the only motive, why leave them behind? The thieves also stole 5 sketches by Edgar Degas, a Chinese bronze vessel known as a gu, dating to the Shang dynasty, and a small bronze eagle finial that once topped a Napoleonic flag. Compared to the famous paintings, these objects seemed almost insignificant, yet they were deliberately selected. Altogether, the thieves left behind hundreds of millions of dollars worth of art while taking 13 specific objects. It suggested that they either had a shopping list, or they didn't fully understand what they were stealing. Within hours, photographs of the stolen masterpieces were circulating around the world. Airports, borders, auction houses, museums, private collectors, everyone was watching, because selling these paintings openly would be almost impossible. Which raised an even bigger question. If no one could sell them, who had ordered the theft? By the time the morning staff arrived at the museum, the thieves were long gone. They hadn't left behind a ransom note, they hadn't contacted the museum, and they hadn't made any public demands. All they left behind were 13 empty spaces, and one of the biggest mysteries in criminal history. Boston police secured the museum and began documenting the crime scene. Investigators photographed every gallery, examined the restraints used on the guards, and searched for fingerprints, fibers, shoe prints, and other physical evidence. Because the theft crossed state lines and involved artwork of extraordinary cultural value, the FBI soon joined the investigation. What detectives found was both impressive and frustrating. The thieves had spent 81 minutes inside the museum, yet they left remarkably little evidence that could identify them. Almost immediately, information about the stolen artworks was distributed to museums, galleries, auction houses, customs officials, and law enforcement agencies around the world. Each painting carried decades or even centuries of documented ownership. Their images were published internationally. Anyone attempting to sell them through a legitimate market would almost certainly be detected. That presented investigators with a difficult question. If the paintings couldn't be sold legally, what were the thieves planning to do with them? As months turned into years, the investigation refused to die. The museum increased its reward for information several times. Today, that reward stands at $10 million for information leading directly to the recovery of the stolen artworks in good condition. It's the largest private reward ever offered for stolen property. As months passed, then years, no paintings surfaced, no credible buyer came forward, no verified ransom demand arrived. The thieves had vanished, and with every passing year, witnesses' memories faded, suspects aged, and potential evidence became harder to recover. Yet, investigators refused to close the case. For years, the case seemed impossible. Then, investigators began hearing the same names, again and again, not from the art world, but from Boston's criminal underworld. Could organized crime have been behind the greatest art theft in history? For 23 years, the Gardner Museum investigation appeared to be going nowhere. No arrests, no recovered paintings, no public suspects. With every passing year, witnesses grew older, memories faded, and investigators faced the possibility that the truth might never be known. Then, in 2013, the silence was broken. On March 18, 2013, exactly 23 years after the robbery, the FBI made its most significant public statement since the night of the theft. Investigators announced that, based on years of evidence gathered from informants, surveillance, interviews, and other investigative work, they believed they had identified the individuals who carried out the robbery. But there was an important limitation. The FBI did not publicly name the suspected thieves during the announcement, and no criminal charges were filed. According to the FBI, the robbery was linked to individuals associated with organized crime in the Boston area. Investigators believed the stolen artwork was moved through Connecticut before eventually reaching members of a criminal network based in the Philadelphia region. This conclusion wasn't based on a single witness. It was the result of years of interviews, confidential informants, surveillance, and evidence collected across multiple investigations. Even so, the paintings themselves remained missing. Over the years, investigators repeatedly examined several known figures connected to organized crime. Among the most frequently reported were Bobby Donati and Robert Gentile. Why? Not because either man was convicted of stealing the paintings, but because multiple investigative leads and witness statements kept bringing detectives back to their names. Federal agents searched properties connected to Gentile. Investigators explored whether Donati had gained possession of the stolen art after the robbery. Despite years of investigation, no stolen masterpiece was ever recovered. The investigation had reached a strange point. Investigators believed they understood much more about the robbery than they had in 1990. They believed they had traced the painting's early journey through the criminal underworld. They had identified people they considered central to the case. Yet the one thing that mattered most was still missing. The art. Here's the paradox that still haunts this case. Investigators believe they uncovered important pieces of the story, but a courtroom never heard the evidence. No jury reached a verdict. No one was convicted. And until those 13 masterpieces are found, the greatest art theft in history remains exactly what it has always been: an unsolved mystery. More than 3 decades have passed since the Gardner Museum robbery. Governments have changed, technology has transformed the world, the internet was born. DNA forensics became routine. Artificial intelligence now helps solve crimes. And yet, not one of the 13 stolen masterpieces has been recovered. So where are they? Unlike stolen jewelry or cash, world-famous paintings are almost impossible to sell through legitimate channels. Every major museum, auction house, and serious collector checks an artwork's ownership history, known as its provenance. The Gardner masterpieces are among the most recognizable missing artworks in the world. Any attempt to auction them publicly would almost certainly trigger an international law enforcement response. Over the years, investigators have considered several possibilities. One theory is that the paintings were used as collateral within organized crime, valuable assets exchanged to secure loans, settle debts, or negotiate reduced criminal sentences. Another possibility is that they changed hands repeatedly inside the criminal underworld, becoming too risky for anyone to reveal. The FBI has publicly stated that the artworks were likely moved through Connecticut and Pennsylvania after the robbery. But after that, their trail disappears. It's a question no one wants to ask. Could the paintings have been destroyed? Investigators have never found evidence proving that they were, but they also can't rule it out. Canvas can be damaged. Fire destroys evidence. Floods, mold, neglect, even improper storage could permanently ruin priceless works of art. Until they're found, no one truly knows. Despite decades without answers, investigators remain hopeful. History has shown that stolen masterpieces can resurface many 7 generations after they disappear. For that reason, the Gardner Museum has never filled the empty frames. They remain exactly where they have always been, waiting. 35 years, thousands of interviews, millions of dollars spent, one of the largest investigations in art history. And still, the greatest art theft in history remains unsolved. But perhaps that's because we've been asking the wrong question. Instead of asking who stole the paintings, maybe we should ask why. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people visit the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Most come expecting to see masterpieces by Rembrandt, Vermeer, Degas, and Manet. Instead, many stop in front of 13 empty frames, not because the museum forgot to replace them, but because it chose not to. Those empty frames have become part of the museum's story. They serve as a reminder of what was lost, but also of what could still be found. The museum has deliberately left them in place, honoring Isabella Stewart Gardner's vision, while expressing hope that the missing works may one day return. In a building filled with priceless art, the most powerful exhibit may be the one that isn't there. The Gardner heist transformed museum security. Institutions around the world reviewed overnight procedures, upgraded surveillance systems, strengthened access controls, and invested in more advanced protection for their collections. The robbery became a case study in balancing public access with the responsibility of protecting irreplaceable cultural heritage. The FBI still considers the investigation active. The Gardner Museum still offers a reward of up to $10 million for information leading to the recovery of the stolen works, subject to its published conditions. Every credible lead is still examined. Because history has shown that stolen masterpieces sometimes return decades after they disappear, there is still hope. Some mysteries are solved by technology, others by chance, and some wait patiently for the one person who knows the truth. Somewhere in the world, 13 missing masterpieces may still exist, hidden inside a private home, stored in an old warehouse, or resting, unseen, in a place no investigator has ever searched, until they are found. The greatest art theft in history remains unfinished. 35 years ago, 2 men walked into a museum disguised as police officers. 81 minutes later, they disappeared into history. The investigation continues. The reward remains. And 13 empty frames still wait. Maybe one day, someone will finally fill them again. Until then, this mystery remains unsolved. If you enjoyed uncovering one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries, there's much more to explore. On this channel, we investigate real events, remarkable crimes, forgotten histories, and mysteries that continue to puzzle experts. If that's the kind of storytelling you enjoy, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss the next investigation. And here's a question for you. What do you think happened to the 13 missing masterpieces? Were they destroyed, hidden, or are they still waiting to be discovered? Share your theory in the comments. I'd love to read it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.